Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, AFC. We get to put a bow on it, Andy. Haven't used that as much in these year's previews, but I'll use it now. Let's put a bow on the AFC South. Sound good?
Yeah, you used to say that a wild
Too
amount.
much.
I don't know. I liked it. It was
Some
it was endearing. But yes, we will put a bow on the AFC South, and we're gonna start with your 2021 AFC South champions. In fact,
AFC
and
1 seed.
your AFC 1 seed, which
How did
things
that
got
happen?
weird. I mean, things got weird at the end of the year with a few of the teams near the top. Obviously, the Chiefs had a bit of a swoon in the middle of the season.
They did.
Buffalo had a bit of a weird season, losing a couple games they shan't have. That's not, I don't know the proper use of shan't, but I should have just said shouldn't have. And then, I mean, just the rest of the league kind of, it's not like they went towards the middle, but yeah, 12-5, got yourself a 1 seed. They won the South. They got the bye, and they didn't win any playoff games. They were one of the victims of the Bengals. I'd say it was a heartbreaker, but when you prioritize running the ball and you bring back running back maybe a little too early and prioritize running the ball with him, and that was your game plan for the full year, it's going to be hard for you to win a game like that sometimes. So I put that, the Bengals season probably should have stopped right then and there in Nashville. But I mean, they did
could have
what they
stopped. It could have stopped at home against the Raiders.
I mean, really,
Derek Carr bouncing a ball off the back of a guy's helmet. I think they scored a touchdown at the end of that game and either win outright or tie and go to overtime. I can't remember exactly. But Patrick, on as usual, he stole my thunder. It was a self-inflicted loss. But again, like if we just kind of go back in time to the beginning of the season and what was expected out of this team, being there in the second week of the playoffs in a very crowded AFC, about as good as you were hoping for.
I think there was a decent amount of excitement for putting those two wide receivers together with Derrick Henry, and they knew that, the secondary might have problems, but they had just drafted a young cornerback and he'd fallen a little due to some injuries, and they thought they might have some pieces up front, which turned out to be true. So I think they thought the ceiling was definitely winning the AFC South. They reached that. The 1 seed, I don't know if they really believed that was within grasp with the Chiefs and the Bills. And my goodness, that still blows my mind how that all worked out. But I think they probably achieved about as much as they could have and should have in a weird way. Getting the 1 seed, it didn't right. Like getting to the second weekend after beating like a wild card team and then losing to Buffalo. Yeah. That felt right. Yes. Getting the 1 seed and losing to a Bengals team like this felt weird. So
yes,
it was a weird ending, right. And they couldn't they couldn't keep those two star wide receivers on the field together.
Oh, man, you're flying. You're not going to reflect on their season anymore at all.
What's that?
You're going right. You could jump right to the offseason?
No, I'm saying they couldn't keep those two star receivers on the field at the same time very much. And then they lost their workhorse running back with a Jones fracture in his foot. He missed the rest. I think that was week 8, missed the rest of the season. So injuries derailed the offense. They stuck with the running game. They got some nice running from their backup. Foreman? Yeah, Foreman. And I mean, they still managed to win some games down the stretch. They really overperformed in the middle of the season. They had that stretch of I remember us on the podcast every week. It's like, shit, are the Titans ever going to lose against a good team? They beat a bunch of good teams in the middle of the stretch. And I mean, there they were. And I don't know if it wasn't like an all-in year, but it felt like it wasn't a 3-bet. It was a hefty raise, if we're gonna stick with poker analogies, because they did say, we're gonna go get another wide receiver. We're gonna try to bolster the defense in spots right away here, and that was the other thing too, that Caleb Farley like that was a risk injury because of his back that he fell to them because he should have been drafted a little higher. And then he ended up blowing his knee out, missed most of the season. So they did suffer quite a few injuries to spots where they were filling in or they were already strong and still won 12 games. So kudos to them. And yeah, before we get into this season, we'll kind of touch on some of the things that happened in the offseason too. But I don't know, your thoughts on 2021 for this Tennessee Titans team?
Yeah, this is how I remember their regular season going. There were questions swirling as we entered the campaign as to, whether the Colts or the Titans were going to win the AFC South. There was a 2-team race in the eyes of everyone. I think our preview was probably kind of hate both these teams. Don't really want to plant a flag at either one. And they started out the season with just one of the most horrific home losses that I can remember all season to the Cardinals, non-competitive effort. And you're like, uh-oh, Tennessee might be way worse than we think. They rescued their season with a comeback from behind victory week 2 at Seattle that no one saw coming. 6.5-point dogs. They win by 3. Really impressive to kind of bounce back at that point. And then they face off, early with Indy to kind of give, either team the pole position for the division, and they beat Indy pretty comfortably. At that point, Derrick Henry, there was a lot of speculation preseason. How much are they going to possibly use him? His usage the prior season was astronomical. His number of touches they gave him in the rushing game were so high that you thought the end is nigh. Like they can't just continue to give him this workload and expect him to be able to handle it. And I remember betting on the Jets week 4 in large part because of how many, how much how much of a beating the Titans defense took in week 3 combined with, how much they had asked of Henry to that point in the season. Plus there were some pretty bad injuries to the wide receivers, I believe, for the Titans by then. And we lose to the Jets, and they're 2-2 through the first quarter of the season, and you're like, yeah, that feels about right. This is a 500-ish team. And then you nailed it. They ripped off a comfortable win against the Jags, and then 4 games in a row where they were dogs by more than a field goal. Buffalo, Kansas City, at Indy, and at the Rams. Those are 3 of them are 3 of the 4 best teams in the NFL last year. But, just realistically, like, don't overthink it. Like, those were elite teams they went toe-to-toe with. And in the case of Kansas City, they beat their damn brains in. Do you remember that game? Like, how in the world does a team lose to the Cardinals week 1 the way the Titans did and then beat the Chiefs in week 7 the way that the Titans did? That was really, really, really strange.
That whole stretch didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So
No,
I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm able to even rehash it, but
yeah,
that it didn't make sense, anything that happened last season, honestly. And somebody said this in the chat too, like a really well-earned coach of the year. Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, you had some stars on this team, but you lost who probably would have won an offensive player of the year or finished runner-up to a cup. Like, you lost, you had there's 2 star, and one of them was a little longer in the tooth, but you had these 2 wide receivers that couldn't stay on the field. I think somewhere I found it said, like, the pairing of Jones and Brown were only on the field for 30% of Tannehill's dropbacks last season. That's not what you want from your 1-2, especially when you just put it together that year. And they were maybe not lucky, but they've been, and again, I found this in Football Outsiders, but this is mentioned everywhere. The Titans were a combined 13-4 in games decided by 7 points or fewer in the last 2 seasons. 3rd best in the league.
I didn't see a lot of lucky wins. I didn't see a lot of lucky wins.
But that's what I was going to say. It didn't feel like lucky wins. It just felt like there were a lot of games that were close at the end. And that does have a way of regressing. And as we get to this offseason and into what they're going to put out on the field for a product next year, I think that's going to help things along. But they are not your favorites to win this division for a reason. And it's not only reasons of what the Colts have done this offseason, I believe. There is probably a little room for this to move down a touch.
Okay, so after that hot stretch, and you can kind of reflect on, I didn't even mention after they beat they beat two ridiculously tough road games at Indy, at Rams, after KC Buffalo at home. They then hosted the Saints, beat them, and they went from 2-2 to 8-2. And if you want to get a 1 seed, that's what you need to do. You need to surprise in the middle part of your schedule. The market continually just did not give them respect. They were dogs. They're dogs. They're barely favorites at home against the Saints. Finally, the market flips on them. Can't cover against the Texans. Lose outright to the Patriots. Excuse me. Not only can't cover, they lost as 10-point favorites to the Texans. Can't beat the Patriots on the road. And then, finally get another cover with a comfortable win against the Jaguars, but they lose to Pitt. And at this point, kind of things were crystallizing where you're like, okay, they're not that good. They may ultimately get the 1 seed, but this is not like a great team. Down the stretch, one very impressive win against Miami, but then lose their finale to Houston Texans somehow. In a game that I guess they probably rested a bunch of guys. But they put to the test the idea of if you rest in week 17 and you have a bye week 18, maybe you come out a little flat in your playoff game. Happened to the Packers last year, and it happened to the Titans on offense. Because in that playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals, the Titans defense was, how do you say, dominant? They were superlative. They were so ferocious in the pass rush. I forget. They had 9 sacks of Burrow. It felt like 19. And it did not matter because Ryan Tannehill played them out of that game.
Yeah, the game plan and Tannehill's performance, they just didn't put up the points they should have. They only gave up 19, and they didn't really feel like they had a shot. They had a shot. It's not like it was a lost game, but yeah, I'm just still, this bugged me earlier too. Like, has a team who got a 1 seed ever lost 2 games to like top 5 drafting teams? Like losing to top 4, losing to the Jets and the Texans as your 1 seed just is so weird. But again, like the Bills lost to the Jags. It's what makes freaking Survivor League so hard in the NFL, man, is this stuff happens every single year. And really, like, I don't know how you feel about last year's Steelers. That's not a good loss either. Like only putting up it is a tough defense, but that should have been a decent matchup, even up at Heinz / whatever the hell it's called now. And they got looks like 117 yards passing that day.
Yeah, and honestly, we reflected in great detail the Dak Prescott failure that was the playoff game wildcard weekend against the Niners, and how that kind of really impacted the long-term perception of him as a player and that team. Because frankly, if you're going to be a championship quarterback, the arc is pretty written in stone. You have as a young player, you make a playoff run, or you make a run that takes your team to the playoffs, maybe a little before people expect. You lose your first playoff game in embarrassing fashion because you're nervous or whatever. Who knows why? Or just because you don't have the experience of playing a team for the stakes and on that level. And then the next time around, maybe you put together a little bit of a run. And if you're great, then ultimately you take the next step and you win, either a conference championship or a Super Bowl, right? And Dak couldn't pull it off, and Tannehill really regressed from the last 3 seasons in terms of his playoff performances, where he took a Tennessee team surprisingly to an AFC Championship game, had a lead, had a shot to beat the Chiefs, loses that game after impressive wins in round 1 against Tom Brady and round 2 against Lamar Jackson. And the next season, Lamar Jackson gets his revenge. You don't win your playoff game because of a bad game plan. That was on Vrabel. And then last year, it was 100% on Tannehill. Tannehill performed completely inadequately to win a playoff game. If he has an average day, the Titans win that game. If he just doesn't make a mistake on his last throw of the game, the Titans probably win that game. Like it is rare that you see a playoff game determined because of the quarterback, that is like you circle a win or a loss of our team and you're like, it's because of one guy's contributions in a negative sense. But that was exactly what happened, I thought. You can blame a little bit, the way that they deployed Henry pretty aggressively in that game. They probably brought him back a little too quickly. But again, if Tannehill does not throw that pick on the final drive and set up a McPherson 52-yard field goal for the win as time expires, then they probably move on.
Yeah, they probably should have won.
Which sets in motion a very weird offseason for this team.
A very weird offseason. Let's get to that offseason. So we dogged on Tannehill plenty, and apparently ownership / the front office agreed enough to spend a third-round pick on a quarterback in Malik Willis. Total retooling of, and this is going to be a theme today, is what the hell is this a wide receiver room going to look like? Because it's certainly not what you'd hoped it to be. And then apparently and this is the kind of stuff that comes out afterwards, but it's funny. I made a joke in one of our chats because boy, howdy, there was a couple people who really thought the Jimmy G trade was going to happen on draft day. And I said, like these big blockbuster things that everyone thinks are going to happen, like you just never seem to get them right before the draft. And then like 4 minutes later or whatever, the AJ Brown trade. So it's a weird spot for them. And I get that, like, what they drafted there with that pick. And I had this in a couple of previews. They basically, I don't know if it was justification or explanation, but essentially you're hoping it's the same guy, but on a rookie deal, because he has the same build. He has the same, hopefully, ceiling, but it does feel like you're kind of punting your way down, because the Tannehill thing makes sense too. If you're deciding to cut him loose eventually, that's how teams manage these bigger contracts on their team is, oh shit, we're running out of money. We need to restructure this. And you restructure it by extending them and then getting way more dead cap money down the line. They didn't do that with Tanny. They didn't do that with AJ Brown. They traded him away. So they're setting themselves up to kind of do a reset with it. And it might not be Malik Willis. It might be somebody else next year. But they are setting themselves up to cut ties with Tannehill, to move on. They've already moved on at the wide receiver room. And, it's weird to say this because we dogged on this defense for a few years in a row. It's like they kept their front seven together. They have, they didn't get the pressure rates that some teams would have liked to see from some bigger names like that. And they certainly didn't get as many sacks as, again, there's a lot of similarities between these two teams today, but they kept some continuity there, and they have a bunch of young players in the secondary where it feels like in a year or two, this is like, oh shit, this is a good defense. Like, man, they just really need a quarterback because Malik Willis isn't cutting it. It's such a weird change in identity for this team. But
it was a hard.
Like, what did you make of all that? Especially, like, it's not talked about as much as the actual moves they made, but the non-action on Tannehill speaks volumes too.
Well, it was that performance alone on that set. There is no excuses for performing that poorly in that setting, considering you have experience, you've won games in the playoffs, you're at home, conditions are fine, you're not going up against an all-universe defense. Like, you're literally out of excuses, which means the only conclusion is you're not the guy. And we've seen this happen before with other guys of the Tannehill cut, cut from the Tannehill cloth. Jake Delhomme, you remember that guy?
Oh my God.
Like, you remember when he played his way out of that guy went to the Super Bowl.
Cool rookie card, though. He had Snake on him.
But then he threw 5 picks in a playoff game against the Cardinals, and that was it. Like, when it's over, when you lose the confidence of your team in your locker room if your performance isn't even going to be average on that day when it matters the most, then it's really tough to bounce back from if you're out of excuses, and that's where he is. And so I think the organization is entirely in their correct decision making to move on at this point, and they're electing to. Yeah,
fully agree. Like, I think it is probably the long-term plan that's being discussed is probably figuring out how to move on eventually. And
sure,
it got me thinking about, like, those NFL NFL countdowns, like top 20 running backs of all time.
Yeah.
Like it would be fun to do some shows like that, but the opposite, like the 10 worst quarterbacks to make it to the Super Bowl in the last 20 years. Like those would be those would be way more fun discussions. But no, agreed. That's what kind of what they decided to do. So yeah, that's again, they're hoping Treylon Burks is just, hey, this guy steps in. He's a big dude. He's 6'3". He's burly. He's pretty fast. They hope he just steps in and can fill the spot. They got Robert Woods, who is, again, never been the guy, but he's been a guy who's had big years as far as targets and catches.
Sure.
They went and got Austin Hooper, who wasn't great last year.
These are all.
I mean, he's good enough, and then but no, here, let me roll with this though. There's a lot of question marks there because Woods is coming off an ACL, and that's it's hit or miss. Not every ACL injury is just going to pop back and be AP that next year.
Yep.
Some of them, it's like, hey, this guy he lost a step. He was never the same. Treylon Burks is already missing practices due to like asthma.
Yeah.
Apparently it came out now that his college coach is like, yeah, this is a thing. He comes in out of shape and like, Pittman just said that. Yeah, he'll come in out of shape, and then he had some asthma. So like he's been missing practices already for that. Austin Hooper, there's no guarantee he just bounces back. And then you've got and if we're sitting here discussing Tannehill, and obviously we think the team is discussing Tannehill, I don't think Tannehill's an idiot. He can probably read the tea leaves a little, and we've seen this in certain years where some quarterbacks don't respond well to looking over their shoulder at the young guy who's been brought in. So
certainly
there's a bunch of damn question marks around what this offense is going to be. And again, Derrick Henry was good. He's always been great. He's been a great player, but even last year before the injury, he wasn't getting as many yards after contact as he once did. You know, people said like, oh, he was fine. He wasn't fine before the injury. He was still good. He wasn't great at times. So this offense, you know, if one or more of those things doesn't work out, and again, Deontay Foreman, he's with the Panthers now. Julio Jones, is Julio Jones anywhere? I think he's
a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
Oh, Tampa. That happened that's funny. Too many things are happening all at once. That's hilarious. I completely spaced that. But I mean, a lot of those pieces that were part of last year are missing. So not a lot of continuity outside of Tannehill and you know an offensive line that I guess marginal.
Yeah.
I don't know where you have them ranked.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about this in two different conversations. You ready? The first is, what is the organization doing, and do we agree with it? And the second is, what do we expect out of this offense? Because they go hand in hand. The first part, what are they doing? They are rebuilding. This is a quiet tank. The way that every decision that they made in the offseason was low risk for the organization, high upside only, right? Getting a bunch of guys who had underachieved on some cheap deals, coming off injuries, letting all of your older guys who were, you know, deciding not paying Saffold, not paying Queensberry, not paying Rashaan Evans, not paying Dante Foreman, not paying AJ Brown. Those are all decisions that send a clear signal, which is we are clearing the books. This little experiment that we had where we thought we could compete in the AFC, it's over. And the reason was
something we've said over and over as we've talked about the AFC.
That is what the front office is telling you.
The timing.
Yeah, you tell me.
The AFC's tough.
If we're reading the tea leaves correctly, and I believe we are, right? You can nitpick who they brought in. You can nitpick their draft choices all you want. Like maybe they're not great at evaluating talent or whatever. But like conceptually, this decision making and what they're telling us, but not saying it out loud, is it right? I say yes.
I agree. I like it. And again, because you can either go the route of, hey, let's extend AJ Brown, let's extend Tannehill, really put ourselves in some tricky positions with the cap in the next few years. And that implies that 2022 it's our year. Like, is that what you want to do when the Bills are looking just as strong as last year? The Chiefs, people aren't even talking about how good the Chiefs can be.
Sure.
Your own division mate went out and filled the one void that they really needed to fill with a veteran presence that we'll get to later in the show. Amongst other teams, I haven't even talked about the AFC North at this point. There's a non-zero chance Watson plays a bunch of games, and they're still the third best team in that division.
Yeah.
Like there's so many good teams in the AFC. I think that probably played a part in that. Like, hey, if we want to put ourselves in a bad position, we have to be sure we're going to at least be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the conference. And it's so hard to say that they could do that with all those other good teams. So I like it. I agree with it.
I'm going to go a step beyond. I love it. Do you know how rare it is? That front offices that
are self-aware
can self-evaluate and have like the freaking balls to do stuff like this? It is really rare. And like, you want me to, the arc is very, very clear. Like Tannehill probably doesn't finish the season as the starting quarterback. They probably would like to see what they got in Malik Willis at some point.
If it goes by the way,
talking about fucking stealing the show, like what was the capital they spent on that guy? Like virtually nothing. Like that, if he is anything, like you potentially stole something, even as even if he ends up just being your backup.
There were mocks where he went in the first.
Sure.
Lots of them.
For sure. Like most of them. Yes. I think almost all of them had, he was expected to go in the top 10. His over-under was 20, like 19 and a half. But it's refreshing that a front office has this much foresight and can act so sincerely in terms of what exactly they have and who they are. And on a time like
refreshing is the right word for it.
Yes, because
it's
almost always the other way. It's almost always the other way.
Yeah. Delusion usually rules the day when it comes to front office decisions.
This is a team that knows their success was on the legs of Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is now on the decline. This is a team that got they got the 1 seed last year thanks to some fortunate bounces and some impressive wins in season. And if Tannehill caught a heater and they go to or win a Super Bowl on that, then mission accomplished. They still, then decisions are a little bit tougher, or everybody kind of gets paid in the offseason. But it went the opposite way. And Tannehill played them out of the playoffs, and it was a clear sign that close this chapter. We have a coach. We have a coach in Vrabel who we like. He's got the rah-rah. He's got the Pete Carroll mentality, the rah-rah ability to rally his guys. Can't game plan for shit in the playoffs, but maybe he'll learn. And I think realistically, this was the best case scenario. But the part 2 of the conversation now about the offense.
What do we have?
This offense sucks.
It's so terrible. Again, what I mentioned there too is like, hey, this is the guy we drafted to replace AJ Brown. He's missing practices already. It's a rookie. Yeah. I mean, the distribution of results you get from rookies year 1 go from like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson down to this guy isn't even playing in week 3 because Westbrook. What I can never say this guy's name right, but the guy with the hyphenated last name, Westbrook.
Yeah, Nick Westbrook Ikhine.
Yeah. Like there's plenty of guys on this depth chart that can, step up over a rookie. It doesn't matter. Oh, I'm a first rounder. There's a lot of first round receivers that don't get playing time because it's like, well, this just guy, he isn't getting
not
it.
ready.
He's not getting it in practice. He's just not ready to go. So like, Des Fitzpatrick, talk about a guy who didn't get a lot of action last year, but people are talking about him, and what a name for a wide receiver. Taking Dez and Fitzpatrick, like 2 all-time greats, and putting it together, that's just a great wide receiver name. So like the outcome of him is very wide. The outcome of Robert Woods, very wide, because he's coming off a big injury, which people are better at coming off that injury nowadays, but it's still a big injury for a guy who needs to run fast and cut on that knee and, run proper routes and do it with a quarterback who probably isn't as good as who he's used to playing with.
Yeah, of course.
At times. And again, you have a huge question mark in the biggest part of what they've done in the offense, because they have Deontay Foreman's gone, and our guy Tractor Cito is maybe playing on beat up legs again. And if that foot injury nags at him, so I'm not going to make any predictions for this offense because I'm just going to say this offense can be above average. If all of this stuff works out, even if it's hey, the rookie kind of gets it and Woods is 80% of what he used to be. And Hooper takes a bounce back season. He's above average and Tannehill's not absolutely dicking the dog out there. It's an average offense.
Ceiling.
Yeah, that's your ceiling. Okay. That's what I'm saying. But there's a low floor because all those things have long tails to the bottom. And if a lot of stuff doesn't start working out for them, the offense could really stink. And that sucks, but that's part of the rebuild. It'd be great for a rebuild. Top 10 pick next year.
Yeah. Okay. So outside of the quarterback, the three most important players, or best, the three biggest contributors on offense for the Titans last year were A.J. Brown, Roger Saffold, and David Queensberry. All three gone.
Yeah, they're not. We didn't even mention the offensive line lost Saffold, and Lewan hasn't been as good. And the offensive line,
if Lewan makes it through the season healthy, that will be this upset.
The offensive line probably is. It's not probably. It's bottom half, and it has a pretty low floor as well.
Yeah.
So
you went from bona fide excellent offense to now you're starting Aaron Brewer, Nate Davis, and Dylan Raduns. Yeah, Dylan Raduns. Was that left tackle? Oh no, right tackle.
I call him D-Rans.
Dylan D-Rad is your right tackle. Yeah. Taylor Lewan, he's a wily vet. He's got a storied past of playing quite well, but that was a long time ago. This offensive line is going to be rough. Tannehill is going to be under duress a lot. Derrick Henry's going to have to do it himself if he even can. And the wide receiving core and tight end core is just a gigantic question mark. You're absolutely right. They threw a lot at it. They were like, hey, let's just go get a bunch of low risk, low cost options and just see if any of it works. And that's fine. Again, I admire the vision, but I think Todd Downing's most important job.
Tannehill takes sacks. Tannehill go look at the sack leaders every year.
Oh yeah, he's in trouble.
If he doesn't get rid of the ball quick, he has a tendency to take a lot of sacks. So,
and I think he probably is rightfully pissed about the way things are going because it's going to be extremely hard for him after that playoff game and after whatever happens to him this year to get any kind of a contract anywhere next year. I mean, I don't know that he's getting a starting shot next year anywhere. Maybe somebody talks themselves into it. But it's going to be tough. He's in a really, really, really bad spot. So I get why he's mad. But Todd Downing, the offensive coordinator, his most important role this season is literally to coach up these young guys so that they can jumpstart the rebuild regardless of the win-loss record this year on the offensive side of the ball. And that means kind of spending a lot of time with Malik Willis to see if he got anything. It means spending a lot of time with, the young wide receivers you mentioned to see if you can get them, fired up at all. But this offense is going to suck. This Tennessee Titans team is going to struggle to score 20 points, much like they did in the playoff loss.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
So on the positive side, and again, there's still a lot of. It's a little more rosy on the defensive side.
Oh yeah,
but not
this defense.
Not by a ton. There's still a big question mark in the secondary, and the secondary is so important. So I said, hey, there was a lot of changes at the linebacking core throughout the season, and some of the linebackers did struggle still with coverage, and that's going to kind of play a part in what I'm saying here is, it's a very young secondary, which again is good for a rebuild, maybe not good for 2022. They kept their front, front seven essentially together, and down the stretch they were very good. Again, I don't know where I pulled this from, but one of the previews said over the eight final weeks of the year, they had the best run defense in the game, 64 yards per game. That's pretty solid. Third best overall defense, and they did. Harold Landry's very good. Autry, Simmons, a lot of pressures, but the secondary, you're relying on, is it a second-year guy in Fulton? Third year. Maybe.
Can't be worse than Jackrabbit Jenkins.
No, Jackrabbit Jenkins is gone at least, but Fulton he's your one. And you're expecting a guy in Caleb Farley who's coming off an injury to kind of step into another spot. Yeah. You got Roger McCreary. You're going to have some very young guys starting in the secondary. Yeah. And if it works out with Fulton, he takes another step forward because I thought he was okay, probably even okay to good. And Farley ends up working out. Like this defense could actually be pretty good. Yeah. But it's funny how it's like, the front seven's okay, maybe lacking a little in coverage skills. And the secondary's probably going to be okay. But if they hit their low end, it affects the whole thing. It's like a house of cards. If your cornerbacks and your
defense is a weak link, Andy.
It is. And if that secondary isn't going to take a step forward as a bunch of youngsters, then it's going to affect everything on the defense. And all those good names up front aren't going to have the seasons they're hoping to, because you can really avoid a good pass rush if the secondary stinks by doing a lot of different things with some creative offense. So it's imperative that Farley and Fulton play a lot better than, what their floor is, or even their median. Like they both have to play above average. And then your defense has a decently high ceiling. So dare I say, this might be an unders team. If the offense stinks and the defense really gels, this could be some ugly football to watch. This could be some 16-19 games like we saw.
I don't think you're onto something, Andy. I think you've solved the puzzle.
Puzzle
complete. Puzzle solved.
Yep.
This offense sucks. This defense fucks. There are some very, very good players on this defense, and you kind of buried the lead, because the most valuable defender on this team by margin is, you want to guess who I'm going to say?
The free safety?
Kevin Byard's number 2.
God, I like him.
Byard's number 2, but Byard's been around. He's been around.
I know
he
needs to take everybody under the wing and make sure Farley.
I have confidence that ultimately the secondary plays fine because he elevates them, I think. But the front seven, Jeffrey Simmons was
Simmons treats it pretty
Simmons was a monster last year. He was quietly very much in the defensive player of the year conversation, just among people who actually know what's going on. And the other thing that's scary about Simmons is that this is his 4th season, and he has made specific improvements all 3 seasons. And he was playing at an all-pro level last year, and he is going to be a nightmare for teams to deal with this year. His most close arc in terms of how he has performed over the first 3 seasons, Aaron Donald. That is where he is trending, and he is going to be so tough to match up against for teams, particularly in his division where you have Quentin Nelson is kind of the only interior lineman of note. And I think realistically, building around Simmons defensively is going to be the identity of this team for the next 2 seasons. I can't say anything more positive than that. Like, and the play that he showed you specifically in the playoffs, I think gives you that much more of a glimpse about what's coming this year. He is going to be outstanding, and I can't wait to see it. Overall, I think this is going to be top 10 defense at the end of when the dust settles. Overall, I think every offense that has to play these guys is going to be, you're going to get their 16th percentile type of a performance. God, that fucking Tennessee Buffalo under on Monday Night Football, that's probably 7 points too high. There's goddamn.
Yeah, when this team goes
there are some beautiful,
a good run defense.
There are some beautiful. Oh my God, I might bet every Tennessee game.
Let's pull up the schedule, Dan.
Giants are catching 6.5 against this Tennessee team week 1. Happily 6.5. Put it in my pocket today. Tennessee Buffalo, that total. Let me look at what that total is. Just, you want to guess while I'm pulling it up?
45.5.
What was your guess? What was your guess?
45.5.
For a Buffalo total, you think?
I don't know. I feel like I've respected this defense enough where I'm putting it low.
Okay. The
Is it
Buffalo
higher? Is it
total
47?
is 51. So almost, like I
I've
said,
been
7 points
horrible,
too high.
horrible
7
at
points
guessing
too high.
totals so far. Well,
7
that's what
points
my
too high.
number is. I'm just going to go with my number.
Mm.
I was only 6.
6 points. Okay. 6 for you, 7
Yeah,
for
in
me.
prime time too.
Ooh, God, that is going to be a good bet to the under.
So a rest disadvantage against a good team. See how the offense looks there.
Man,
it's not a bad schedule, but it's still a first place schedule. So you do get Buffalo, you do get Green Bay in your crossover game. You do get God, what is the other one? You do get Kansas City, and then some of the other games that just like we said earlier in the week, you get the AFC West. So you're forced to play a probably resurgent Denver team. You're forced to play Las Vegas, whose offense is probably going to look good, even if the defense isn't. That's a fun under game too, maybe. And then the Chargers. You get the Chargers late in the season. The benefit of the game, the benefit of the division is that maybe the Jags aren't going to make the Super Bowl versus the Lions, like I think, but the Jags are still a inexperienced team with a lot of turnover and a new coach. So Jags and Houston 4 times helps, but other than that, like where are the gimmies here? And also, what are we doing with this Cincinnati line on the 27th?
Oh boy, another beautiful under. That's another beautiful.
I mean, but also, do you feel like Cincinnati is gonna take? We haven't got to them yet, though. I think that line's off. I'm saying,
yeah,
it's at home. It's at home, but
Yeah.
The home field should probably be 1.8. Like, it's Cincinnati not a couple points better than this, even against a tough defense.
By the time we get there, that'll be 3. I mean, that's the time of the season. You kind of circled that stretch there. Andy, if there was a 4-game stretch that killed a waning quarterback's career, would you say that it is KC, Denver, Green Bay, Cincy?
Oh, then Philly is a team on the ascension too. Like
that 5-game stretch. Good night now.
Yeah, you know what's a good spot?
Over.
Like, hey, this Jacksonville defense, like, we'll take care of Josh Allen. And there's not a whole lot else to offer at times. Like, guess what? Malik Willis, we're putting you out against the Jags at home. That's a nice starting spot for you, right?
Yeah.
The Chargers might be a tough one for you. Like, we're just going to try to not get you killed between those two Jesus. That's not a good one for him. Hopefully he can run fast still. But then Houston, Dallas, Jacksonville. Although Dallas just added Anthony Barr today, if they get Eric Eager had a good point on him. Like, as creative as they've been with versatile players, like Anthony Barr is probably a nice addition to that team. But Jacksonville twice and Houston in that stretch, Dallas at home, like that's a good Malik Willis tryout period for them. And really, like their win. I'm not. We've said a lot of negative things about this team. I'm not running to the window to bet this under. This is probably a little high, but not enough where I'm jumping at it. Really,
put on your powers of how this plays out from what the organization is trying to do. They are
with such a high level of unknownity on the offensive side. And what could be a defense that keeps them in games where anything can happen. And then God knows what they're going to do with Willis or how he turns out. So, like, I'm fine just I'm fine just not betting against this team right now. 8.5 sounds high, but we got to remember there's 17 games now. Playoffs, no. That would be, if I had to bet playoffs, no. I would prefer that over the under at this point.
I think this team comes out of that Philly game 2-10.
Let's look at these odds quick, Drew. And again, if you want to go do a but look at this team. And this is 9.5 at FanDuel, minus 135. Wow. But maybe you get a plus number on 8.5, but to make playoffs, no, at like minus 110, that feels like a decent bet that I put in my pocket. Just feels like, how does this team make the playoffs with how good the AFC is? Even as the second favorites, minus 110, because they either win the AFC South or they don't make the playoffs. I believe the way things hash out with a lot of these teams. So I like to make playoffs no quite a bit.
This is one of the few teams I'm going to
Feels
take
safe.
a strong stance on. Like Tennessee and Pittsburgh fall into the exact same mold for me this year, which is the secret tank and/or just an incompetent offense combined with a defense that has some really, really good players, so that like the games are still competitive. And if they're ever catching a touchdown or something against an offense that's not that good, you're taking those points. But the wins just aren't on the schedule. And I honestly think I think you get wins against maybe I'll give them 3 out of that Philly game. You get a win against Washington, a win against Houston, and one other surprise win maybe. And you're 3-9 at that point. Tannehill's done. You're seeing what you got with Willis over the last 5 weeks. You probably lose both your games to the Jaguars.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, do you? I don't know. There's so much. Like Robert.
I mean, the Jaguars. You mean like are the Jaguars? You mean like are the Jaguars going to be resting their players in Week 18 as they're prepping for the playoffs? Is that why you're asking?
Just like, I just think there's so much uncertainty with the offense, and when they start Willis, we believe it's a tank, but it's not enough for me to take like an alt under. Okay. I would rather just take the safe. Really feels like a safe bet, just playoffs.
I don't know, dude. I think we are have this solved in terms of what this organization is trying to do, and there are very few examples where the market is this wrong about a team.
Why is a Wong teaser more valuable in low totaled games?
Because the margin of victory is even more likely to be 3.
Yeah, the smaller margins of victory, closer games, and that's what a good, possibly great defense lowers the total of a game. Essentially, they're going to have. I worry that a good defense keeps them in too many games, and they win. They just sit there and go like 9-8, miss the playoffs by 2 games. I think it might take 11 to be a wild card in the AFC again. So,
well, how about this for an angle of attack? Are they going to finish above or below the Houston Texans in wins, losses?
I mean, their floor is right there with them, 3 or 4.
So you think?
I mean, the Texans could win like 1 or 2 games. That's not off the table.
Very
finishing third, finishing exactly.
That's where I'm going. Yeah, there we go. Okay, there is that line exists, by the way. Let me look at what it is.
Go to Bet Online.
NFL final standings, AFC South, Tennessee Titans to finish third is. You want to guess?
Plus 320.
425.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Plus 425. I think I'm gonna
Let's make a bet right here.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Where were you? Is that Bet Online?
Yeah. So this captures the Jaguars.
Which menu it is? Which menu?
This is basically this is basically a parlay of the Jags making their win total and the Titans not, but you're getting played plus 245 plus 425 for it. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's basically what this is. This is a parlay of 2 win totals.
Again, which menu was it under? It's
under
NFL futures, NFL team wins,
final standings. NFL.
There we go. Got it. AFC South. The AFC North is conspicuously missing from that.
Weird.
I wonder what's going on over there. So, all right, final thoughts on the Texans. There's going to be, the Titans.
Yeah.
There's going to be some very nice under spots for this team, and I'm betting them to miss the playoffs. Especially if I can find a better number.
This is a temporary. This is a temporary sell on the franchise. I like the franchise. I think they ultimately come out of this smelling like roses because of their realistic attitudes. But this year is a sell. And I think they're basically telling us that with how they conducted themselves in the offseason. And yeah.
All right. Tennessee.
Good pod.
Oh, God, here comes the bot. The best adult dating site.
How does it get us right at the transition every time?
I don't know. It's very good about that. I'm married, bot. I don't need the best adult dating site. Also, I don't need it. I would just go find a second wife. I wouldn't use a dating site. All right, to the second one, and we'll talk a little bit of Colts. So 3, 2,
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Indianapolis Colts, Andy. It is impossible to have made it to this point in your preparation for the NFL season and not heard some expert on some show tell you how much they love the Colts this year. The clear most buzzworthy AFC team in terms of just picking a team, because every year there are a couple of teams that finish just outside the playoffs, make a couple of splashy moves, and everybody all of a sudden is like, that's my dark horse. They were close. They made a big move at quarterback. That's my dark horse.
Oh, that's my horse.
Right? That's my horse, right? This is an archetype we see every single year. And I would just, in general, throw a little bit of caution on that, not because I have some sincere knowledge that this is not going to work. We have spent a lot of time now talking about how this AFC might suck. AFC South it is the weakest conference in the AFC, I think, broadly, and I don't think it's close. And I think from a talent standpoint, the Colts are clearly the best team in this division. What say you with respect to how the current perception of the market temperature on this Colts team coming into 2022 is relative to your eyes?
I'll be betting on this team.
Oh, there we go. Interesting.
And you know what else I should say? I'm almost forgot this. I'll be using them in some contests, as these previews are brought to you by the Circa Survivor and Millionaire contests. $12 million in prizes, no rake. Come out to Vegas with us, sign up, win a shitload of money in the Survivor League or the just the Millionaire contest, where you pick 5 teams against the spread each week. And it was being discussed in the Deep Dive Discord. Like, they asked, what do you need to do good at handicapping and also just run hot? Like, the winner is going to be close to 70% if you want to win a bunch of money. But guess what? Losing last play, getting dead last in that, it actually pays out too. So you can win some quarterly prizes as well. A lot of cash prizes in there. No rake. Sign up at Circus Sports. And the Colts in 2021 were, and a couple previews I read made this joke, and everyone's making this joke, and it's so easy. It's just Groundhog Day. Like, hey, we have 90% of a team and we need a quarterback because ours just retired. Well, let's just go with this. Let's go with Brissett. Let's go with Rivers. Let's go with Wentz. Like 5 years in a row now. It's a new starter on opening day. And yeah, I think it's Luck, Brissett, Rivers, Wentz, Matty Ice.
What year did they start with Tolzien? That was during the Luck era. I think he got hurt.
That probably was. But it was a very rough start for this team. And then they had, it was, again, similar to Tennessee, where they had an okay middle of the season. It wasn't the eye-popping wins that we saw from Tennessee, but it's like, all right, Wentz is, once in a while, he's throwing a back-breaking pick or making a left-handed pass that's killing this team, but they're managing with a very good run scheme and a very good player, probably the best running back in the league, honestly. I'm going to say it.
Yes.
And they're making things happen, and this team is in contention to make the playoffs. And then lost to the Jaguars, and I think they needed. I believe it was Pittsburgh also had to win at Baltimore, and then they had to lose to the Jags, and it was a weird situation. But they did not make the playoffs because of that, and they lost some games they shouldn't have, and that's how you end up with 9-8. They lost their last 2 games to the Raiders and the Jags, ended up at 9-8 after going into those last 2 games, obviously 9-6 in a decent position. They lost both of their overtime games to good teams. But yeah, starting 1-3, starting 0-3, and then kind of bouncing back, ending up, like 9-6, like I said, after a late bye week, which I believe they have again. It's a team that probably saw, we're talking a lot about the front office and the rebuild and what you're doing as an organization looking forward, that probably said, like, this is crazy, guys. I know I've said this before, but I think we're still just a quarterback away from like competing as a decent team here. And there was pieces to get. It would have been hard to get Watson, especially with what was pending. They didn't probably have the runway for that, but I didn't hate this move. I talked a lot about maybe them getting Kirk Cousins. That was a good spot for them. Yeah, Tolzien did start week 1, 2017. What a call, Drew. I forgot about the Tolzien thing.
I think he lost 44-0 to the Rams, something like that.
It was not good. But yeah, so they haven't won the division since 2014, which also, funny enough, I read somewhere was the last time they beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville. So it feels like a team that's had some measure of success, but I just said they haven't won their own division in like 8 years. They missed the playoffs again, and they've just never felt like a team that was dangerous at any point, despite having, like I said, the best running back in the league. They've had some good wide receivers come through. They've had a lot of young wide receivers that we thought were going to produce more than they have. They've really drafted well. I think they've nailed a good coach. And yeah, this was a disappointing 9-8 team. And I think Wentz was probably a mistake. God, I got to pull that quote because I had this quote written down when we talked about Washington, but the GM says it at the team meetings. I think the worst thing you can do is have a mistake and try to keep living without moving forward. And he was talking about Wentz. Like, that's pretty damning, but also maybe, like you said, with the Tennessee Titans, a little bit of self-awareness where they said, you know what, just move on again. This isn't it. We still have enough pieces where if we have somebody who's not Carson Wentz, we can maybe do something with this team. And man, I'm hopeful. Not as hopeful as some people in the market, but I am hopeful for this team because there's enough pieces. But again, like we've mentioned over and over and over, the AFC is awful tough. That's probably what's keeping me from really getting excited about this team because I don't know if, even if everything hashes out right, do they have enough to win multiple games against like at Buffalo, at KC, or even hosting one of those games? It's a tough ask, even at the top of everything here.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun how different every team we talk about is, and the Colts feel super narrow distribution. Super narrow.
I made the joke with
Ranger.
With who Cousins. I said, like, man, they get Cousins behind that offensive line, like they win 11 games, 12 games maybe, get in the playoffs and just get the shit beat out of them by like the AFC North wild card. It feels like that's kind of their path here.
Yeah, I mean, the chances that they make the playoffs, high.
Yeah.
Chances that they win a playoff game, medium to low. Like it is a team that I think is built very, very much for winning regular season games. It's in the weakest division, so you have, presumably, you're looking at 5-1, if not 6-0 in division. Right there, that sets you up for maybe being last year's Tennessee. Maybe you steal the 1 seed in an otherwise very, very competitive AFC. You could steal the 1 seed, sure.
AFC South 1 seeds going 0-2 in 2 consecutive years in the playoffs would be funny. But yeah, I mean, not only that, there's a ton of other winnable games on this schedule. Like their ceiling is like 12, 13 wins.
Surely.
They could get a 1 seed. Like that's not out of the realm of possibilities.
No. We're kind of jumping. I mean, we made this a quick podcast. I think we basically nailed it. Good job. Colts get the 1 seed and lose in divisional round of the playoffs. Who we got next week, Andy?
Yeah.
Let's give them their due. Let's give them their due.
All right, so I'm done with 20. And somebody in the chat just pointed out too, like there were plenty of reports that Wentz was not a good locker room guy. The team really didn't. You did not rally behind him.
Shit.
That was like, it's funny when that happened. It's like, oh man, who saw this coming? This was the most obvious thing that was going to happen. Like nobody likes him.
I'll kind of relive a couple moments then, if that's okay with you. Week 1 loss to the Seahawks. Okay, we came in last year, and I was basically like, I'll let everyone else get fooled that the Colts are going to steal this division because I want nothing to do with Carson Wentz. Like not going to do it. Not going to war with that guy. And he did not show up week 1 against Seattle. He then had probably one of the most advantageous situational matchups that still exist in sports, week 2 against the Rams. And I backed them at +3.5. And that was the game where the left-handed pass compilation starts with, and somebody shared that with us today and immediately gave me PTSD because that first drive, Colts are clicking, everything looks good, and Carson Wentz does the left-handed shovel pass into the linebacker's lap, right on the goal line. Just absolutely it's gonna be one of those days, right?
Like I'm gonna go find my spreadsheet. Mark that a loss.
They ended up covering by the hook, by the way. I think it might have closed 3, so maybe the people who didn't get 3.5 got screwed there. But 27-24 they covered, but lost the game. And then they lost again week 3, which is funny because 3 losses in a row for the Colts under Frank Reich. Who could have believed that? Except it happens every year. What in the world is it with Frank Reich teams that they get off to a slow start? I can't tell you. But lo and
that
behold,
was like I've mentioned on some of these podcasts, I read a lot of camp reports, and every freaking Colts article has 8 things to look at for the 2022 season. Like, can we avoid the cold, slow start? Like, that's everything. And it is funny because it's a thing, and they do need to.
Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy though?
Well, and we haven't got to the schedule yet, but
anyway, slow start, and then ultimately they turn the corner. Carson Wentz is the highlight of his career, his season, for my money, and he took a lot of money from me in this game. Was when he went at San Francisco in the primetime game, and they had the bomb cyclone, and there was 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds, several inches of rain during the game, and the Dome team won 30-18.
They put up a lot
and
of
points, and it went over the total. And that was the low point of my entire year last year betting. That week 7, I got absolutely annihilated, and that primetime game was the denouement. And
vocab word.
I think that was the last time I bet on a Colts game, maybe all season. If you do just look at win-loss though, the Jonathan Taylor experience really got going when the weather got colder, even though they're a dome team again. The Buffalo game, they won. Did you remember they beat the Buffalo Bills? We would joke about the Jags beating the Buffalo Bills. That was 9-6. That was just a weird, stupid game. Yeah. Indianapolis went into Buffalo and they hung an L on the Bills that they haven't experienced in a long time.
Buffalo Colts games always seem to get weird.
Wild, right?
My favorite being the big snow game from about 5 years ago.
Of course.
Yeah, that was they. If there was a word to describe what happened last year, odd and inconsistent. But yeah, putting up 41 on the Bills, putting up 30 on the Niners in a hailstorm. I mean, putting up 45 against the Jets maybe isn't surprising, but giving up 30, like that game. Do you remember that game? I think that's when I was in
Thursday Night Football.
Yeah. Oh, so I was at
the Breeders' Cup.
And you can go back and watch this halftime stream to prove this. I was in the parking lot of a yard house or something, wherever we stopped at to get lunch. And I remember watching this game, this game's off the goddamn rails. Like everything about this is there's something just wrong about this game. And 75 points in that one. Jonathan Taylor going off, and the run scheme plus his skill, plus being able to mix in Nyheim Hines, that run fit was fun. And if we'd have got a little more, and a couple people have mentioned this, Wentz, you look at his stats and it's it doesn't look that bad, but everything seemed to be at the wrong time. When he would make a mistake, it'd be at the wrong time, or he just never stepped up at the right time. It was just poor timing by him. And then again, the team didn't rally behind him. And essentially, there's not 500 seasons anymore unless you end up with a tie, I guess. But essentially, a 500 season in the long run.
Yes, and I agree with your take. Statistically, people probably look at Wentz's numbers and are talking themselves into, but we wasn't that bad. there's some good stuff here. There were some good performances here. But having watched a lot of Colts games, I can tell you there was a consistent theme, which was that the offense and the scheme that they gave him made it so that it was tough for him to fail, and yet he found ways to do it. Right?
Yeah, they coddled him.
They coddled him. They gave him and like they were like the what rubbed me the most was there were some plays that they set up where they got Pittman just completely uncovered. Pittman won his matchups, and Carson Wentz wasn't even looking at him. He was waiting for the check down, or he was like spooked by the pressure, or I don't even know what the hell was
Sometimes
going on.
it was like reverse check down where it became a thing where he would like wait too long for something else, like a kid playing Madden where he has his idea of what he wants this play to be before it happens. Instead of evaluating the field, evaluating what the defense is giving you and taking the best option, it's like he really wanted to be aggressive on certain plays, and it went poorly at times. Like it's like, why didn't you just hit that guy? Why did you wait for the deep break? And that wasn't there, and you threw into double coverage. It wasn't always an interception, but you'd end up with problems. So I don't know. It was a pain in the ass to watch, honestly, from a standpoint of being a fan of football. And I don't know. It wasn't. You could just tell, like, if you watched it, it's hard to describe what Wentz did. Like, it's hard to come up with the right words, but it's like he didn't want to be part of the team. He didn't do what was best for the team on his reads.
Yeah, but here's
determined to like make the wrong reads at the wrong times all the time. It was maddening.
Yeah, here's my 2 cents. Some quarterbacks fail because they don't have the tools. Some quarterbacks fail because they don't have the accuracy. And Wentz failed because he did not have the decision making. He could not make the correct decisions over the balance of that game. Did we lose our broadcast?
Yeah, I don't know.
Carson Wentz specifically trying to nuke us here.
Did Carson Wentz?
Oh no, we're good. I think we're good. But yeah, no, the fundamental shortcoming was his decision making, his ability to read the progression and make the correct decision. And fundamentally, I think he lowered the ceiling of this offense because of it, which is saying a lot because you have two really, really, really good young draft picks in Jonathan Taylor and Pittman who emerged last year. And if you had a quarterback who was even just doing the QB manager and not making it didn't have the physical tools or didn't have the accuracy down the field, you're still going to the playoffs last year if you're the Colts based on Taylor and Pittman and the defense. And so it was that was a really just a truly lost season for them the way it played out. And it's all 100% on Wentz in my mind, notably that final week loss, which is the most inexcusable of them all, where the Colts were 8-point favorites, Andy, something like that. Yeah, Colts, Jags were catching 8 or something like that at home, or 15. I can't remember. But whatever the case is,
it moved a little during the week.
Okay. Well, whatever the case is,
there were some early bets that weren't as good.
I didn't win any money on that game because I parlayed it with the Raiders tie, and we never got that. So
that was fun. That's a discussion for a different day. So that's a discussion. All right, so we've established that the general consensus is, and I'm going to steal a line from one of my favorite hosts here on the local sports radio: all duckies and bunnies. Everything's rose-colored glasses or whatever. I guess blue. They don't have the best colors for this analogy, but rose-colored glasses, everyone's pretty happy about this team. They think they're going to do big things. I think we're in agreement, but we're going to play some devil's advocate and talk about some of the reasons why they don't.
That's a good idea.
And I think.
Well, what did you think of their offseason? They didn't have any draft capital.
No,
because they traded it away for. Remind me, was it traded away for the D tackle, DeForest Buckner?
I think that was part of it. Man, they lost other picks. Like they lost two picks for Wentz. They got some back there though.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, that wasn't great. They did add some veteran free agents. I was surprised they didn't add a receiver. I would have liked to see a little bit more help there. Like Pittman did take a step forward, and Like, that's good. I think you're going to end up with probably a nice player there, but you're putting a lot of pressure on basically everybody else to this is your wide receiver room. I don't know. Does it feel like Packers light with an older player? But like Alec Pierce, that you're going to expect a lot out of Alec Pierce. Paris Campbell has, I think, the most games he's ever played in a season is like fucking 6.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're putting a lot of pressure on guys like that, and I don't know. Like I'm not overly enamored with what they have at receivers. You're going to have.
I did not realize this, but the Indianapolis conceded pick 16 to Philly because of Wentz.
Yeah, no, he played enough games.
Shit.
That was the worst part of it was if he would. We talked about that. We said that in the preseason last year. Said
because he had the broken ankles, right?
If he's a disaster, they bench him, and yeah. So the first wasn't for Wentz because we didn't think he'd ever play that many snaps. We said if he's ineffective or they're not in it late, why would they play him and risk giving up that first rounder? And then they let him play through like injuries and semi ineffectiveness, and still gave up that first round. It was something.
We
really thought they weren't going to do that. They did.
We blew it. I still can't believe that they agreed to a trade for Wentz where if they played him, it would escalate to a first. That's mind-blowingly bad in hindsight. I can't believe we forgot the funniest betting part about the Colts last year. Wentz gets hurt early in camp. Quentin Nelson gets hurt early in camp. Everybody and their mother bet under 8.5 wins for that team.
Yeah, they ended up on 9.
Right? Or was it under 9.5 wins and it landed? Whatever the case was, I think that Jags game put the season-long win total in the balance one way or the other. But anyway, their offseason was tough, really. Other than the Matt Ryan acquisition, all of the and Stephon Gilmore might have something left. Yannick Ngakoue might have something left. Dennis Kelly might have something left. Rodney McLeod might have something left. Like, they went after a bunch of old guys, which is kind of telling you what they think about this season, right? Like, this is it for them. 2022 is their chance with this.
Even just the quarterback move. It feels like they are going for it a little, despite, and that's right. I think that's why I was surprised they didn't add one more piece to the wide receiving room. Like, they are going pretty bare bones, because if you look at some depth charts, like, their backup depth is like Desmond Patman. I don't know who that is. Like, Ashton Doolin.
Who?
Kylan Granson might be your starting tight end at times. It's
Kylan? Did you say Kylan?
Kylan.
That's how you know we're old. People with the name Kylan are making it into the NFL at this point.
That's where the NFL is at this point. So I'm a little worried about the receiving core. Hopefully they can scheme around that, because you have a backup running back that can probably play.
Are there any wide receivers that could potentially, you could pick somebody's pocket in season with the trade?
I think so. I think there'll be some spots. So I hope that's the case for this team. If you're bullish on this team,
they do need one badly.
Also, like, Hines can be a slot receiver sometimes. Hines can split out wide a little. Like, you have some options there. So I'm hopeful, but that's probably my devil's advocate on that is that, and the offensive line has very good pieces, but sometimes can be a touch overrated, because I think it just turned into it's a solid offensive line, and it is. But I don't know. Maybe part of that was Wentz too, holding on to it a little long, and sometimes that skews things. But I think we've got a quarterback who has enough experience getting just pressure up in his grill all last year to kind of work around that. So I'm hopeful for the offense. I just wish they'd have done more in the wide receiving range. And then also too, from our very lovely brief previews that I've loved reading, but while I'm kind of getting ready to read all the camp reports, Cleve TA points out that he will be facing Jonathan Taylor. I should say the name of the player before I say he. He will be facing the 5th easiest set of opposing run defenses. And this is an exact quote from this. What is incredible about Taylor, says Cleve, 21 season is that he ran for nearly 2,000 yards and 18 touchdowns against the single toughest schedule of opposing run defenses. Based on success rate, he played 10 games against top 13 teams on run defenses. Wow. He did that against a tough run defensive schedule. They're going to have a much easier one. So I'm worried about my Justin Jefferson Offensive Player of the Year based on this guy, but I think maybe you'll see a little less run with a competent quarterback, but it could be a very good year for him again.
Yeah.
Should.
In the blind, I guess the Indianapolis Colts offensive line is entirely the Quentin Nelson story, because it's, he's on pace or on track, if he stays healthy, to be kind of in the discussion as far as Hall of Fame guard goes. That's sort of the level of play we've gotten through 4 seasons. Even last season, where he was only available for 13 games, he was still second team All Pro every single year. First 3 seasons he was All Pro first team. That's pretty outstanding. And his general tone and his attitude pervades to the run game in general for this team, which is they play very physically in the trenches and they create space for Jonathan Taylor. And I think that is still going to be the case, even with some of the turnover they had. Ryan Kelly is a very, very solid center. And I think, the rest of the guys are fine, not great. And where they struggle is largely in pass pro. And so there's a wrinkle of a window where, and we'll get to Matt Ryan in a bit, but there's a wrinkle of a window where that becomes an issue for this team. But the running game does not concern me whatsoever, being able to pick up exactly where they left off and maybe even improve. Jonathan Taylor, by the way, what season is this, if you didn't have it in front of you?
Third? Only his third
season. I know. He's been such an ever-present part of the last 2 fantasy seasons that he feels like he's been around for a while. Maybe it's the generic name.
I know. I was going to say third, and I pivoted to fourth. I'm like,
what's generally good about that? You only have 2 seasons worth of football on his legs. You only have 2 seasons of football on his legs, and his contract is also very favorable.
Yeah, the opposite of the Derrick Henry. Like, he doesn't have 10,000 carries on those legs quite yet. And you have a competent backup that can spell him.
Yeah, and the 2 seasons we've gotten, the 2 seasons we've gotten from him so far were, he was not the rookie of the year the previous season, right? Now I'm blanking here. I don't believe he was, but he was very good that year, his rookie season. Top half of the league from a production standpoint, even though he only started 13 games. Last year, he absolutely deserved to be in consideration for Offensive Player of the Year. He was an All-Pro. In fact, actually, did you know that in the All-Pro voting, that he got so many All-Pro votes that they only had 1 running back for the first time in a long time? Usually there's enough split that they name 2 running backs first team, but he was the sole first team running back. His, if he builds on, most running backs have an uphill kind of improvement curve. It's not as steep as a quarterback.
He's gonna run for 2,000 yards.
I mean, he should take a step forward. Like, that's a reasonable expectation. You shouldn't be projecting statistics for him this year that imply a regression in any way, shape, or form outside of injury potential. So it's, he is on the up, which is scary for anyone who's, already, facing him on their schedule of run defenses.
Will Fuller, that's a
Pittman,
good call.
Pittman,
that's a nice dad.
Just want to
I didn't watch enough fucking Cincinnati games, Bearcats, to understand, like, if this Alec Pierce is actually like NFL translation. I'm a terrible judge of rookies anyway, so I don't know. Like,
no clue.
If it has to lean on him again, if the wide receiver room underperforms and they have to lean on the run game, maybe they're still pretty okay. Like, I said, they're in good hands.
Okay, so I think we need to spend a second on Pittman. He's freaking elite.
And they're going to ask him to be.
And, Andy, what season is this for Pittman? You know?
2.
Number 3. This is his 3rd season.
I tried to go the other way that time.
This is his 3rd season as well. So you have 2 elite stars at a running back and wide receiver that are entering their peak. They have not gotten there. And in general, I think Pittman was largely held back by Wentz last year. If you
that
look
makes
at
all 3 the quarterback too. It's his 3rd year.
Is it?
No,
I don't think so.
3rd year getting
33rd year
yearly prostate exams.
Is it his 37th year on Earth?
He's
but no,
36, I believe.
I mean, that you can't deny though, having elite weapons should help everybody. Like there's a network effect there for sure. So let's talk about Matt Ryan then.
Hard to evaluate last year. It was a really bad team.
Sure is.
You missed receivers missed time. Pitts was making the adjustment to the league. They didn't really know how to use him right at the offset. The offensive line was basically 5 giant hefty bags of waste in front of him at times. They didn't get a lot from the run game, and they were often playing from behind.
Big heavy bags of Falcon shit.
I was sort of like medical waste. I'm thinking of the scene in Fight Club where they go steal from the hospital. God, that's what popped into my head. I'm sorry.
The lipo
section. But regardless, it's hard to evaluate him off last year. He's not that far removed from an MVP season. He was basically it's been 7 years.
7 years in football terms might as well be.
And it's a long time, but I mean, he has been an MVP. He didn't get there last year, but he's been throwing for 4,000 yards a year for like a fucking decade. Mm-hmm. He is your steady Eddie vet who was in a bad situation last year. I don't think anyone's going to confuse him and start talking MVP awards if this Colts team overperforms. But they're definitely going to give him a credit. There's going to be a lot of he's another coach right there in the huddle. He's a leader on the field. He's really taken these young receivers and worked on the side with them and really gotten the most out of them with his veteran presence. There's going to be a lot of cliches, and they're not going to be wrong because I think he is an overall, he is a good leader. And I think that's what you're going to see from him. So he's not going to make massive left-handed mistakes right into a linebacker's gut.
Yeah, that's true. Without looking, how many games did Matt Ryan win last year?
I mean, they drafted 8th because they took London, so 5, 6,
7. They were 7-10.
7 games.
He managed 7 wins last year. Started all 17.
The Falcons have been a team you just can't bet for 3 years now.
Here's in his career, Andy, since 2008. Where he was the rookie of the year. How many games has he missed as a starting quarterback?
Oh, Christ. I'm trying to think of his injuries. It's 5 total over that. 3. That is amazing.
3. It's the third 3. It's the third.
There's the third 3. Yeah, that is actually 3.
3. They come in 3s, Andy. Not to make light, but Bill Russell and Vin Scully.
Oh no!
I wonder who the third is going to be. But
that does always happen too. That's weird.
No, he won 7-10.
I watched so much Vin Scully footage today.
He went. Same. Is very, very, very huge part of the culture here in Southern California, especially. So, rest in peace. The Matt Ryan arc, however, has been the kind of arc as a quarterback that you use to train an AI model on what an aging curve looks like. Okay. It has steady improvement up to a peak and then steady decline.
So that peak, I believe that was halftime of the Super Bowl.
That's right.
I feel bad. That's right. Everybody was thinking it.
It was actually about halfway through the third quarter. But no, seriously, in seriousness, his MVP year was his clear peak. He built up to it, and he has regressed since. And there are lots of factual reasons you can point to that happening between the decision making of the Dimitrov era and who they brought in, who they put around him, his salary impact on them being able to build a roster. But at the same time, like, you know, we'll get to Tom Brady and how he has defied the aging curve and how that could be possible. But Matt Ryan has not defied the aging curve. And this is an opportunity for him to have kind of a positive blip, right? A season that looks, surprisingly good relative to the decline, just because of the pieces around him are so much more solid. I hope that happens for him. I like Matt Ryan a ton. I think he's just in general a good steward of the game and doesn't get quite as much credit for how good he's been and how long. But there's a non-zero chance that he's washed. And most people are talking about the Colts and their potential to threaten the AFC like there's a 0% chance.
And I think that's where I was saying, like, not, hey, it's hard to evaluate last year because he played on a shitty team with a bad roster, and he's probably a lot better than that. It could also, that pendulum swings both ways. It's hard to evaluate, like, because he could have been more washed than we know, and it's hard to evaluate on that team because you can say, well, those weren't his fault. It was the parts around him. And it is such a there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts in a football team. So it's hard to tell, but he's getting put in such a good situation comparatively that even if he is a little more washed than he's been in the past few years, he's just in such a much better home. He's like the dogs in those Sarah McLachlan commercials. It gets adopted by a great family.
Yeah. There's been, that's fair. He's going to have a great final year on Earth, apparently. There's a lot of people who point to the Phillip Rivers, bringing him in for 1 year. At age 39, he was even older.
That's a little older.
The people point to that as a comp. I would just point out that there was no years in Phillip Rivers' tenure at LA that were as bad as Matt Ryan's last 2 years. And I've seen a lot of people put together threads about how Matt Ryan's not washed. And we made, I respect the fact that the guy won 7 damn games in the NFL, which is super competitive. But his performance statistically cannot be argued that it was, it was worse than anything we saw from Phillip Rivers before he made the leap to Indy.
That's what's so hard with the supporting cast. So
yeah, sure, yeah. How much of it was no Ridley and Jones? Who knows? But it still is like it's a leap of faith that you're going to be able to get playoff winning performance out of a guy at this stage in his career in a new system, regardless of how good the pieces are around him. And I think we've pointed out fairly that this offense has question marks both in pass protection and in wide receiver depth, especially.
Going back to Wentz, if they do that, what they did with Wentz, where they coddle him by having great run schemes and calling the plays that will mask his lack of probably a deep ball like he had when he was younger. He's a smart quarterback who gets it, who has been around and isn't apparently a locker room cancer. He'll take advantage of that, and I think he's fine not playing hero ball if he can win a bunch of games with this team. So if they play to his strengths, he'll be more adaptable to that than Wentz ever was. So I think it's a team we saw it. They were smart enough to kind of game. Oh man, it's silly that you should have to do this. He's a member of your team. You're almost talking about him like he's an opponent, but they game planned around Carson Wentz last year, and they were good enough about it where he almost had to go out of his way to screw it up sometimes. With Matt Ryan, you're not going to have that. He's smart. He's savvy. He's a vet. I think it's going to be fine.
Okay. Well,
and like Femi says, in the regular season, they can hide it. In the playoffs, good luck.
Look, man, I will. I have a proprietary metric that I use for quarterback performance that we don't need to get into. the biggest leap I can ever tell you of a guy going from year to year in past age 35 is what Brady did between the Patriots and the Bucks. That was a phenomenal outlier, though. Like in general, you get a huge improvement in terms of your situation, even if it's just even if it's just on your own team. They just bring in a good player or a couple of good players, spend money, put good guys around you. Like year over year improvement, once you get past age 35, is very, very hard to come by, and it's relatively modest usually. And so I think anchoring kind of a median expectation for Matt Ryan that is anchored at last year plus a little bit is completely fair. And, I think ultimately there will be opportunities to bet on this team, as we will get into in a moment. But I would not expect MVP level performance all of a sudden out of this guy. Like he's, frankly, Matt Ryan is not an MVP candidate, period. Like he's not. And
well, no, not at this age. But like I said, if he does, he's going to be so involved in the game plan too, and he's going to understand it so much better than what we saw last year. So I think it works out fine. And I still am just worried about worried about the pass pro and then some of the wide receivers. They did make some moves.
Well, actually,
defense.
let me push you because I didn't prep you for that about the MVP comment. If the Colts get the 1 seed, it will be perceived as some of the parts, and Jonathan Taylor is more likely to get the lion's share of the credit. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's hey, guess what? The defensive additions that I was about to bring up worked out. The offensive line play was better, probably not just because of those skill players, but because of Matt Ryan. It's kind of a, just like we talk about coverage and pass rush being two pieces that work so much together. Like you talk about quarterbacks or sacks being a quarterback stat, like a quarterback who understands timing and moving around and has the pocket presence, like he will make that offensive line better. But no, there's not going to be like, if there's MVP talk, it's not going to be about Matt Ryan. There's just no chance. Like they don't have this deep ball offense where he's going to have these huge games. The MVP talk will be, if there's any, it's around Jonathan Taylor for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And we can laugh at that and hopefully find value on some quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Defense. There's a defensive adjustment that I want to bring up to you, Andy, and you're the guy that really dive into this. The great Matt Eberflus is gone. This is now the Gus Bradley show.
I haven't talked about Matt Eberflus much, but yeah, he is gone. And again, we haven't decided if he made them or they made him, but Gus Bradley has had enough success in stops where I'm fine with him he's had, I think what he did last year was he made some guys that I had pitched out the window okay. And I think he's good enough to keep this defense humming, especially if the Darius Leonard procedure to fix his leg, which was actually a back procedure. I read about this. So it was some discs in his back that was affecting leg pain, which is a thing. The body's all connected. The leg bone's connected to the backbone.
Sure.
And if that works out and he can play at a high level again, and Ngakoue, who's been on like 9 teams over 3 seasons, I think he was on 3 teams in 1 year a couple seasons ago. If Ngakoue, and he had 10 sacks last year. I kind of forgot about that. If Ngakoue and whatever Stephen Gilmore has left, if that comes to fruition, he'll probably get more credit than he deserves. Like, I think he's a middle of the road defensive coordinator. I don't want to shit on him like you do.
Let's go back. Fine. No. I'm not trying to shit on him. It's the same. It's the same story. It's the same story as Matt Ryan. There's a career arc for a defensive coach if you have a certain scheme that at first taking the league by storm is the scheme du jour, gets figured out, and then the arc ends with you get buried by the Chiefs twice in one season, and ultimately you can't get off the field against Joe Burrow and you lose a playoff game, right? Like it's something that he has generally gotten figured out. Like there are teams that can't take advantage of it, the fact that it's been solved, but he has been solved in my mind. And I think realistically, the teams on their schedule that have the tools and the quarterbacks to take advantage of it, which, by the way, there aren't.
I think everybody knows what he brings. Like, it's just the same cover three that always, but he has good pieces here. Like, the Buckners, and if Leonard is healthy, and if Ngakoue just picks up where he left off, which was where Gus was, Stephen Gilmore, if he can have some sort of resurgent, like, you have enough pieces where this is a good enough defense to just keep it going, despite him probably being pretty predictable.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
You have enough playmakers, so
yeah. Darius Leonard is elite. Kenny Moore doesn't ever get talked about. Kenny Moore never gets talked about. He is a very good cornerback.
Kwity Paye and his even as a rotational guy,
he was solid as a rookie. He should take a step forward and be a real contributor. Muhammad actually was pretty damn good last year as well. Is he still on the team, or did they lose him? Oh, they lost him. He's gone.
Oh, Dana.
Yeah. Bobby Okereke. He's pretty decent. He's young. There's some young talent on this team that should continue to take steps forward. And I think, you have really, really solid anchors at all three levels. Kenny Moore in the secondary, DeForest Buckner on the D-line, and then Darius Leonard in the middle. You can absolutely build around that with the talent you brought in and the talent you already have, taking a meaningful step forward. Generally, though, the Gus Bradley defense is getting exposed in the playoffs. It's kind of what I feel. Same way as I think Matt Ryan's ability to kind of elevate your ceiling offensively gets exposed in the playoffs. Gus Bradley's defense gets exposed in the playoffs. This team comes short of the goal of making or winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, this is the Moneyball athletics. Like, this team is set up to win by attrition. It's good enough to get to the playoffs, and then the Yankees come along and beat the shit out of them. Like, it's a good team that has a ceiling that with some limitations. So
yeah,
I'm not excited about Gus, but good enough with the pieces you have. So schedule?
Let's look at it. The schedule is quite easy. Again, it's hard to come by easy schedules in the American Football Conference. But the Colts got one. And it's largely because they get Houston twice, Jacksonville twice, although those games are going to be more competitive than the market thinks, says me. And then Tennessee twice. You also get Washington. You get the Giants. And your divisional, your cross conference, or so your cross division matchup in the AFC happens to be Pittsburgh. You get a full slate of games against the AFC West, which is tough. But yeah, I mean, this is,
and again, like I mentioned when we went through the 21 season, awful late bye. 2 years in a row having that week.
I think they must have requested that.
Sucks. Do you think so? I don't like having that bye for a team.
I think they probably requested
Femi, it's a revenge game. I mean, revenge games should automatically be set as a pick 'em. Like, I'm fine with it. But yeah, that number's probably wrong at home. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Terrible line. Absolutely atrocious. That's actually, you know what's funny? It's really funny you brought that up. I think that's a mistake. I think it should be 3.
Yeah.
Because
why would they be? You go look at like Tennessee. They're favored by 3 at home.
That was
Washington. They're a pick 'em at home. That was
the biggest. That was the biggest.
Where are these lines at?
DraftKings, or somebody scraped them from DraftKings and they made a mistake and they've since corrected it. I don't really know. I'm not constantly updating these, but yeah, that one is an incorrect line.
Yeah, Westgate has Indy 5.5.
That sounds about right. That's a terrible line. Anyway, the ones around that though, pick 'em Tennessee, pick 'em New England, aren't necessarily going to be the game numbers we see in those games either. I don't think. Especially at Tennessee, pick 'em. It's probably pretty good about now. Tennessee's coming off their bye though. Anyway,
big breast disadvantage in that spot.
Yeah. I think ultimately, though, it's still a relatively easy schedule for AFC. You're favored or pick them in a lot of games.
Well, and like I mentioned before, too, about Jonathan Taylor, like what Cleve said there, if that's the crux of your offense and they're playing overall easy run defenses for a good part of the year, maybe that's more important than the actual opponents. If like your strength is going to be other opponents' weaknesses more times than not, that's how you win more games than you lose.
That is how. I agree. The general read on a couple of these other spots that are fun. Indy complains every year that they don't get enough home primetime games and that they always get screwed. They got 2 Monday Night Football games at home this year. So congratulations. 4 primetime games overall. NFL apparently thinks this is a team you're going to want to see because they're probably going to be in the mix, particularly those 1, 2, 3 late in the season primetime games. So they think Indy's going to be in the mix. Very excited for that Indy LA Chargers game, Monday Night Football, day after Christmas. Oh, buddy, you want to talk about making the Christmas blues go away? The Christmas is over. How about a Monday Night Football game? Chargers,
Boxing
Colts.
Day. Oh,
God
Patrick
damn,
said a Boxing Day game.
Boxing Day game against Chargers.
That's such a good day too, because there's always, and I don't know if Dan would probably have an answer to this, if the Boxing Day games get affected by the World Cup. But that's always like, I love that there's a shitload of soccer, and then Christmas you have the NBA. Oh my god, that's gonna be such a nice stretch.
Oh, it's gonna be so sick. Got a lot of fun game. I think I'm gonna watch a lot of Colts games this year. There's just gonna be a lot of a lot of fun games. The Denver game's gonna be great on Thursday Night Football. I love it when we get a good Thursday Night Football game early in the season. Those October Thursday Night Football games are usually pretty damn fun.
Sometimes they suck.
The ones earlier in the season, like week 3, week 4, are usually pretty forgettable. But giving us Indy Denver week 5, that's gonna really kind of give. That's a great time of year too, because we have playoff baseball going on. That'll give us a nice shot in the arm in the month of October. Great fucking month. Yeah, it's a good fun schedule. This looks like, this looks like median 11 wins. What do you think?
Yeah, like high ceiling or low ceiling, high floor for sure.
Low ceiling, high floor. That's correct. Kind of Eagles-esque, although the Eagles schedule is significantly easier. This is still kind of in the conversation. Let me scroll here. Scroll. I'm just curious if they fixed the busted line between. Oh yeah, DraftKings fixed the Washington Colts busted line. It's out to 5 now. So you can't go get a bet down on a bad line. But I don't hate -5 if we're being honest. Against the Washington Commanders and Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz is even if he's even the quarterback, at the time,
Boxing Day is the return for the Premier League after the World Cup. Oh, so this could be.
I'll just say overall in the schedule, travel's pretty balanced, rest is pretty balanced. You don't have too many tough, cold outdoor games late in the season. Not too many disadvantages, frankly. So. Colts should get some dubs this year. 9.5 is a little on the low side. What is the current market number? I bet you it's up to 10. Let's look at their odds. The Indianapolis Colts are 22-1 to win the Super Bowl. It's probably fair a little short of my fair price. I think I'm probably in the 24-1 range. I should pull up my fares. 12-1 is a more interesting number if you're going to bet Colts, just because, again, we talked about the window of opportunity is there for them to get the 1 seed, at which point winning 2 home games and it's going to be against tough teams, but that's more likely than 1/13 implied probability.
Especially if your defense is humming along. And you can keep some close games with defense. And
open up the dome, really kind of let your defense.
Everybody thought they had the strategy to beat Kansas City a couple years ago, where it's like, we're going to run the ball, we're going to play good defense,
keep away.
Like they actually can do that. So make the playoff numbers probably low. by a little bit, but I'm not betting into that.
Same with the South.
Really, I'm probably not taking much preseason on this team, despite how much we've said nice about them. Like, I will bet them week by week, depending on matchups, and if there are
no alt over ladder for you here. Schedule's not soft enough.
If I had to bet, I would probably be like a 10.5, 11.5. Take a look at those prices. So I don't know, maybe, but for the most part, it's going to be a bet on team week in, week out, depending on matchups.
Okay. Betting plan of attack, Andy. I don't think it's worth betting them to win the AFC South, even though we think it's more than, it's 50-50 or
no,
better.
I like that Tennessee prop better.
Minus 115 is a fair price. And what the hell? What if the Jaguar surprise really is really kind of in the back of my head? The general feeling about betting them game in, game out is that the market is not especially what's the right word? They're not going to be surprised if this team gets off to a good start this year. I mean, they've been telling everyone they're focusing on it, and so I don't know that you're really ever going to be able to corner the market on good bets, betting on them week by week or betting against them. I think numbers are probably going to be pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
They have a very good run defense, and Pittman and Taylor are dynamic enough weapons offensively that happily backing them in second halves if they're down. Do you agree? Frank Reich makes some great halftime adjustments over the balance.
He's a good. I was going to say he's high on my list of halftime coaches.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Frank Reich, but we're Frank Reich guys.
Yeah, I think anyone who listens to the podcast regularly knows we're Frank Reich guys.
I think everyone who cares about football
I think that's part of I love the marriage of Frank Reich and Matt Ryan too. Just kind of just even keeled guys who are gonna dadgum win some games. That was
they are. If they start slow like usual, betting on them at reduced numbers, that'd be lovely. Would love it.
Hard to start slow. The first two games are against they should win those two, but the third one's tough. Maybe some bounce back spots.
Phillip Rivers went into Jacksonville as an 8-point favorite week 1.
Like I said, they haven't won in Jacksonville since 14. Will Matt Ryan be that? Matt Ryan's he's been since 2014.
Since 2014?
That's the last time they won in Duval. And basically, like the best they've done with the Jags for like 8 years is split. It's like Miami and New England. It's just apparently a bugaboo for them. So I don't know. We'll see if we can. We'll see if we can break that streak with the crafty Catholic from BC and Frank Reich.
Oh man,
Are people calling him the crafty Catholic? Is he? Do you even have to be Catholic to go to BC if you're good enough at football?
No,
I don't think so. Either way. I'm excited for this team.
He's probably Catholic. I think it's going to be a good team to bet on second half if they're down. It's going to be a good team to bet on second half if they're up.
Yeah.
You think Jonathan Taylor can put away? You think Jonathan Taylor knows how to put away a game? You goddamn right he does. You think defense has enough of pass rush with Ngakoue to put away a game? Probably.
Again, he had 10 sacks last year. If we get some stuff out of the rotational guys, it could be a good pass rush.
So you're thinking second half Colts in general with the
second half Colts. Like again, if they're up and they are a second half, clearly the better team, favored pregame, winning at halftime, and they're like a 3-point underdog in the second half to an inferior team. So you take Colts money line to win the second half, where they win the second half like 7-6. Just one garbage touchdown against a couple field goal drives.
Solid.
And that feels great.
You know what? From here on in, to get ourselves into halftime broadcasting shape, we gotta weave in second half betting plan of attack for teams that have a couple of primetime games.
Like in speed. Like what do you do?
Hot shot. Yeah.
Colts are up 8, playing an inferior team. Second half line is Commanders -2.5. What do you do?
Ooh, let me give you. You know what?
It just moved to -2.5, -115, dude.
Andy, let me give you a more specific. Let me give you a more specific one. Week 5, Thursday Night Football. Colts are taking on Russell Wilson and the Broncos. Ooh. Everyone's healthy. Colts are up 7 at halftime. The second half line, Russell Wilson, is -3. The total is 24.
That's an under.
It's an under. Okay. Interesting.
I think so.
Russell Wilson's not running his way back into that game?
I believe in this pass rush. I think it's going to be fine. Well, I don't know. That is maybe probably a spot to stay away, because if there is a spot where I'm worried, it is the secondary. The safeties are not great.
Who are the safeties again? Julian Blackman and Nick Cross? Ooh, yikes.
Yeah.
Who are those guys?
If you get good cornerback play, good for you. But like,
hey,
Rodney McLeod,
God damn, we got to talk about this. But like, why isn't a team like the Colts, if they're all in for this year, why haven't they called the Bengals to try to get Bates? Bring in Master Bates. That guy is definitely.
I'd rather see Fuller. Go get a wide receiver. Go get a wide receiver.
You want to see a wide receiver? Okay.
I want to see one more wide receiver.
I'm just surprised that the other contenders in the AFC have not taken advantage of what looks like an obvious Mike Brown too cheap to know any better and not paying Bates, because Bates is good. What do I know?
He is. No, I mean, you're right. I hadn't thought about adding a piece there. I'm just so.
Well, you pointed it out. Their safeties kind of suck.
Yeah. I just didn't.
I don't know if that doesn't. You're right. You're right though. That doesn't raise him. That doesn't raise the Colts to championship contender, but gives them a better chance to get the 1 seed. I don't know. Rodney McLeod is second string right now, and I think that's correct. I didn't think he was very good.
I think it's a camp battle, like we're seeing. And apparently the left tackle camp battle was settled pretty quickly. And they said it before the draft. They said, we have a left tackle. It's Matt Pryor.
Yeah.
And they did draft Bernhard Raymond, which sounds like a bad guy from a David Lynch film, but apparently he's running with the 2. So Matt Pryor is next to Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly. And if he plays well, that's a very strong side. So strong side.
I like it, man.
All right. The Colts, thumbs up, guys, before you leave. Have a good night. If you're listening to this in the podcast form, hands on the wheel. 10-2 guy. Pay attention. If trying to take notes, do it in your office, buddy. But enjoy. If you have anything to say, obviously leave it in the YouTube comments. I've enjoyed some of the comments. I've enjoyed chirping back and forth on some of those. I take some time every morning to check those out and see what people are saying, even if you just want to say hi. So leave some comments on the YouTube. Enjoy your week, and we will have a Friday show again with someone smart. We're going to have a fun topic this week. I'm pretty fucking pumped about it.
Yes. I've been thinking about everything I'm going to say. I'm very excited. I have a couple like
it's almost like a game. It's almost like a game. Like, it'll be like a game.
I have a couple canned takes that are going to get laughs out of you guys.
Bated breath.
Okay. There's one that
Tell me.